Welcome everybody to the first of our OCC Pacific Fleet videocasts. We've never done this before. We did it last week for the Northwest Passage. That was hugely popular with the Northwest Passage makers, but of course they don't see many people up that way, so they were keen to hook in and talk to each other. And they'd never used Starlink to actually talk to each other on Passage or whilst they were doing their expedition. So it's been followed by more than 100 people since then. I don't know how many people will follow this, but it's good to meet up online, and it's good to pick your brains as you go west so that we get the best places to go when we sail west in a year's time. So welcome everybody. I'm just going to go through and ask you all to introduce yourselves. So first online this evening was Jamie and SunYoung on Enki. Jamie and SunYoung, do you want to tell us where you are and what you've been doing for the last few weeks?
We've mostly been hiding from the wind and waves. So we're in the east end of Makemo, and I think it's been some of the nicest inclement weather we've ever experienced. Sunny and cool every day. A little bit loud though.
How strong have the winds been in Makemo? Have you been gusting up to 30 plus, or has it been staying below 30?
Every once in a while I'll get to 30 plus, mostly in the 20s.
Okay, good. And very good holding on Makemo, very good sand, very good firm anchor. Excellent.
You can use the satellite charts to find areas with no bommies, and it's sand and 3 meters.
When you say the satellite charts, you mean downloading the satellite photographs, the satellite layer on Aquamaps or whatever, OCC, whatever, which is just brilliant for spotting bommies. And I guess it's replaced the cap file, hasn't it? Because we always used to make these cap files for visiting obscure anchorages, but now we've all got Starlink. We can stream it all direct straight onto our navigation packages. I know the cap files are still very popular with the open CPN people, but for those that like to have us on our iPhones and iPads, live streaming is just brilliant. So great. So Jamie and SunYoung are on Enki, which is a relatively small boat, 36 foot?
38.
38-foot monohull, yeah. Great. So we'll just skip briefly on. We've got Richard and Alex, who were our near neighbours about 3 days ago, but they dropped their mooring, which was picked up within about 2 minutes of it becoming vacant. And I think you guys are in Raiatea. Is that right now, Jamie? Richard?
Yes, we are in Raiatea. We left you. In fact, I think the moment we dropped the mooring next to you, I think the price of real estate in the area must have gone up dramatically after we left, and the neighbourhood improved, crime rates dropped, all sorts of things. And then you had an election. We're in Raiatea, and just like Jamie and SunYoung, hiding from the wind round the side. Even this evening we've had gusts of 25 knots, but we keep saying this is the last day. This is the last day of the wind, and sometimes it goes 6 knots. Or 7 knots. You think,
it's down to 5 knots this evening. So.
Yeah. Anyway, and we're on a Lagoon 450 catamaran.
And for others' benefit, Richard and Alex have been ahead of the pack all year this year, because you left Panama pretty early, didn't you? Early January, mid-January. When did you? No, before that.
10th December. Then we went to Costa Rica and wended our way here. We don't go anywhere particularly quickly.
But they do go in style and comfort, and I can vouch for that, having had drinks on their huge Lagoon 450 or whatever it is. I presume that's not meters, but it's a very comfortable Lagoon catamaran. And the people above you on my screen are soon to upgrade to a catamaran, so I'm sure they'll be keen to hook in and discover the delights of catamaran living. Thank you, Richard and Alex. So next on my screen, I've got Annika and Michael, who are on the boat called Matilda, who I think is also still sitting out the squash zone somewhere on Aputapi. Is that right?
That's correct. We're still in Tuamotu and hiding up for the wind in Napataki. We are on the east side and well protected by the motos so we don't get any waves on us, and a fair amount of wind. We've been having gusts up to 36, 38.
Wow.
So it's been fresh wind, but also it's been cooler than normal and not very much rain or bad weather. It's relatively sunny weather.
So
we've been able to have.
Are you anchored off the boatyard there, Michael and again?
Yeah, quite close by actually. Yes. So we get the possibility to walk around the boats on hard almost every day to look at them, and they do slowly progress those are maintenance and working on the boats. But it's a nice place, Apataki. So we are pleased being here, even though it's been 1 week plus, I think now.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So the boats that have been worked on, that's been worked on by the owners. They don't have any trades there, any artisans there to do work for you, do they? So it's all people doing their own boats.
Yeah, that's how I understand it. They don't seem to have any crew or working people there except for the guy who's driving the lift for putting the boat on hard or putting it back into water again.
Yeah. Right. So next on my screen, I've got who have we got next? We've got Ulf and Monica. Ulf and Monica, you guys are on Pacific Wind. You've had an eventful crossing of the Pacific thus far. Just tell us briefly what happened to you guys. What was it, a week out of New Hivaroa?
Oh, you meant when the Idalina? Yeah, it was two days out actually.
2 days out.
Yeah, we got from a message from Jagan that Idalina was having problem with the steering. So he gave me the coordinates, and we was steered actually straight for them. Then we were in contact with Idalina by itself. But just when we arrived 2 hours later, the boat sank. So just we went on stage. So we just took down the sails and turned around, and the boat was gone. So we had to pick them up. So, but we have prepared to help them. We had prepared to bilge pump for 230 to pump, get to them, and all kind of stuff to try to save the boat, but there was no time for it because when we had turned around, the boat was gone. So it was really scary moment. Yeah,
see, it's all been written up this month in Practical Boat Owner. I think Ingmar has written an account of what happened, I think.
Yeah, that's what yeah.
So I think you are buddying still with Matilda. So you're in Apatapi as well, and you've got gusts to 38 knots.
Yeah, they're only 50 meters away, so they're here.
For those that
I think we're 5 or 6 boats on this anchorage. Yeah.
Matilda and Pacific Wind have been inseparable for the last 5,000 miles, as far as I can make out.
All the way from Galapagos, yeah.
So next on my screen, we've got the Ruffians. We've got Ian and Fiona. How are you guys doing? You're about 2 miles away from us, I think, at the moment.
Yeah, so we're in Hanui in the society. Huahini in the societies. We arrived here after sailing in the squash zone last night from Raiatea, and
it wasn't too bad.
Yeah, it was fine. You had 30 knots of breeze
from behind.
So that was all fine.
But it was cold. When the big gusts were coming, the wind was really, really cold. I had a jumper and a jacket on. It's the first time I've put a jacket on in a long time.
Wow.
And a blanket around my knees.
And we're happily sitting here on a free mooring ball in
enjoying the scenery.
Yeah.
I have to say, Raiatea was a beautiful island. We loved Raiatea.
Raiatea, okay, yeah. And were the moorings there, or were you anchored in Raiatea? I think you were anchored.
No, we were anchored.
You're dragging from time to time.
Yeah. No, we were anchored, trying to find the shallow spots, which meant that it was quite slippery, slimy mud. So when the big gusts came through, we slipped once.
So just two things.
A couple of other boats were slipping around. But we just re-anchored and it was fine. Big gusts come down the mountains.
Huahine with its free moorings is a great place to sit out these squash zones, I have to say. It's been very sheltered here and very, very comfortable. Last in this evening is Menno and Valerie, who are on their boat Eyra, another catamaran couple. And we haven't seen you guys for a week or two. Last time we saw you, you were in Fakarava South. I have no idea where you are at the moment, Valerie. Where are you guys at the moment?
So we are in Tahanea. We actually had a day sail from Fakarava, which was a thrill, finally. So we're in Tahanea in the southeast Anchorage, and we've been here, like everyone, for the past week and a half in a nice moat, hiding behind the motu. So we've got the wind, but it's flat calm and sunny day. So it's nice. Yeah.
We were with about 16 boats, and some left today. So I think we're down to about 9 boats now. But it's been a really great place to sit out these winds.
Yeah.
Well, Tahanea is a great place to sit out a blow, isn't it? For people who haven't know what's going on, we're in the middle or coming to the end, I think, of a squash zone, which is an area of accelerated trade winds that happens when you've got an intensifying high butting up against a low pressure system south of 30 degrees. I think I've got that right. I'm no meteorologist. Are there any meteorologists here? Richard, you've been here longer than the rest of us. Is that roughly right?
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. Yeah, I honestly, when you read the French Météo, I'm not sure that the French Meteorological Office really knows what's happening out here either, to be honest.
That's a good comment. That's a good comment, actually, Richard. The French Météo seems to overstate everything, apart from that storm we had 2 or 3 weeks ago, which it completely missed. But if you read that, I don't think you'd ever venture anywhere. Is that everybody's experience? Do you think it's unduly pessimistic, or what do you guys think? Ghostly silence.
You get the French ones.
I think the forecasting around here is just so much less accurate than what we've all been used to in the North Pacific and around Europe, because the forecast is just not as accurate as that neck of the woods, because there's less traffic, less observations, and less commercial need to have good forecasting. So I think all the forecasting here is really like a work of fiction.
It seems pretty accurate over the last week or two, Ian.
It's been howlingly windy.
Yeah.
But I mean, the French Météo has made it howlingly very windy, with is talking of 3.5-4 meter seas, which when we came into Huahine expecting that, we didn't get anywhere near that. Yeah,
I don't think we got the French feel very much at all.
Sorry, say again, Jamie.
Overestimate.
Let's go to Jamie.
I said I don't think we've looked at the French media very much. But yeah, I mean, they were saying that there's a big series of waves, and then when you go look at predict wind and GFS and Euromodel, it's not nearly the size that the French are saying.
I think what we've seen is that the areas that they're covering, that they give the forecasts for, are too big an area. So whereas you can actually get much better definition by looking at the models yourself. So there may be a bit of their zone that has got 3.5 meter, 4 meter waves, but actually most of it hasn't, and I guess they have to report the worst of it. That seems to be our experience. But add 2 penny worth. But yeah,
I think it's a bit like the shipping forecast in the UK, that it's very much an open ocean forecast, not a coastal forecast.
The sea areas.
So you've got to take the coastal effects. Yeah, you've got to take the coastal effects into account as well.
Can I talk a bit about visas, because that's had a lot of traffic on the various social media groups. I should call it Valerie's coconut group. For those that don't know, Valerie on Eyra is the queen of social media. She founded this immensely successful coconut milk run group. She did it in a swimming pool in Shelter Bay, and instantly she has 240 followers and about, I don't know, 50 posts a day as its highlight. So we bow in praise to you, Valerie. It's been fantastic, and I hope you're going to keep it alive for next year, because we want to continue with it. Will the coconut milk run live on?
Yes, I think we just need to change it to Coconut Milk Run 2025 next year. So we'll just keep moving on until we're all safely in port somewhere in the world.
So the thing that's been much discussed, well, the things that have been much discussed on the Coconut Milk Run are yogurt, visas for French Polynesia, and of course the weather, and many other things actually. But the visas are an issue. I know that this doesn't affect the Europeans because they can stay here as long as they like. But we met a Norwegian couple today who have fallen foul of the change in the regulations, as have the Swiss. So they are non-Schengen countries, although they opened their borders to Europeans, but that doesn't work in French Polynesia. So Swiss and Norwegians have, like Brits now, to have a visa if they wish to stay for more than 90 days. And I know that one of the time pressures that Ruffian are facing is that you don't have a visa, Ian and Fiona, do you? So you have to move on in the next few days, I'm guessing, or next week.
So I think we've got another 10 days here before we've got to leave, but we kind of elected not to get a visa, and I think in hindsight it was,
I would have preferred to have had more time,
but conversely, if you have more time, it means you have less time in Tonga. So I think that the challenge, certainly for us, I think the challenge is that 18 months here is too long, but 3 months isn't long enough.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that other people's experience? Richard's got his hand up. Richard.
So our experience is that we got our visas, 1 year visas in Panama on the way through because we allowed more than enough time. It took about 6 weeks. Yeah. I think it was ready after a month, but because we went back to San Blas, it was 6 weeks. And we arrived into the Marquesas in early February. So we would have been gone a long time ago if we hadn't bothered to get the visa. And there was a lot of online paperwork, and also one of the things that we were told, they were very, very clear about this. You can only get your it's not really a visa. That's not quite as a carte. It's the right to obtain a carte de séjour is what it actually technically is. You can only obtain the right to a carte de séjour outside of French Polynesia. You can't apply in French Polynesia. You have to do it in Panama, which is a great place because the embassy there is really set up for it. If you go to Paris or somewhere like that, they've never heard of it, and it's much more of a struggle. So that was one of the factors. The other factor for us, I think, was that we watched the world art go through year after year, and the oysters, and they all come back with the story saying, "Oh, we all pushed the 3 months to the maximum, and it was not long enough." Just on a technical point, I'm British and I'm as European as a Frenchman. So I just want to make the point that you mean European Union, which is I'm just as European as everybody else, even though I'm not an EU citizen. And yeah, we've talked to Norwegians and Swiss who've been pretty gutted. Some of them have been lucky enough to be married to an EU citizen, but otherwise they've had the same problem. But then what we've since heard is that Tahiti Crew, which is the agent you can pay to do things for you here, they have now managed to get people long stay visas, if you like, carte de séjours, applying here in Tahiti. They seem to be able to get them in French Polynesia, which was absolutely not the case. We tried doing them months ago. Apparently now you can get them here in French Polynesia.
Valerie,
according to Tahiti Crew, anyway.
Valerie, I think you've got some experience of that because you are traveling with a European, this is or a European passport holder, but you had to get your own visa once you'd arrived because Menno had to go for medical treatment in the States. Do you want to tell us what happened to you guys?
Well, so first off, with the visa situation, I'm American and Menno's Dutch, so he's EU. So we did not have to apply for a long stay visa in Panama before arriving in French Polynesia. I was able to apply for my carte de séjour here in French Polynesia after we arrived. So it was just a matter of filling out some forms and submitting them. So it was a lot easier than it was for all the Americans having to do it in Panama or out of country. So that process was very easy for us to do coming in country.
Yes, and Kevin helped us.
And Kevin at Nuka Hiva Services in Nuka Hiva, where we cleared in the Marquesas, he was able to assist us with the paper process and the translation and the things that needed to get done. So for an American or somebody married to an EU citizen, that process is relatively straightforward. It was easier than what the Americans had to deal with out of country.
Sure, and I can certainly that. Sorry, go ahead.
No,
yeah. And apparently it's ready for us to pick up in Nuka Hiva. So that took maybe, was it 30 days or 60 days?
Longer than that. So I don't actually have the paper in my hand because all the paperwork had to be sent to Tahiti, and the paperwork has been approved and it's sitting in Nuka Hiva. So when we go back for cyclone season, we'll pick it up. So it's been a non-issue for me not having the paperwork in my hand. So far, it seems to have been a very simple process for me being married to an EU.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Still have to get one.
But you obviously had to get a visa because you were for a period not traveling with Menno. Yeah.
No, I didn't have to get a visa. So when we landed here,
you were still within your 90 days.
So we had to go back to the United States for an emergency situation, and so we went back to the United States by airplane. But I was still within my 90 days of my tourist visa.
Okay.
That was stamped when I got into the country. So I was still within that 90-day visa being a tourist. So it was not a problem for me to leave and come back into the country. Yeah. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, it does. It does. And just for other people's benefit, Kevin, of course, is our OCC port officer in Nuka Hiva in the Marquesas, French Polynesia. So I think most people have probably got visa. I know Jamie and SunYoung have visas. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, 1 year visa.
Yeah, we did it in Panama.
And of course the Swedes don't need them. And certainly we're very pleased that we got the 3-month visa because it kind of just takes the pressure off we're going home anyway, but it's meant we haven't been forced to deadlines imposed by bureaucrats, which has been super. And also we found it very easy to apply for in Panama. And the top tip there, I think, came from somebody on the, I think from Sarah on the Coconut group, which was that you can you can apply for your visa, go for your interview, keep your passport. And indeed, we went back to Britain and then came back and collected the visa stamp when we flew back into Panama 30 days later. I think a lot of people go up to Costa Rica or something like that to await their visa to be issued. That worked very well for us. So I just want to, I think everybody on this call tonight all came from Panama. I think that's correct. I'm correct in saying that. Yep. Mm-hmm. Some went via Galapagos, others came direct. Jamie and SunYoung. Jamie, or SunYoung in particular, I don't think you'd done a long ocean passage before. So what made you choose a 4,000-mile ocean passage as your first ocean passage instead of stopping off in the Galapagos? So tell us a bit about the sailing that you've done and how you found that 4,000-mile passage.
It was one of the most difficult times, I think, in my life, as far as I remember. But it was also fun. It wasn't really easy on the monohull all the time, cooking, cleaning, eating, taking a shower, and also night watch. I don't know. It was only when I was in high school I had to stay up late. But other than that, I could go to sleep anytime I want. I mean, over the night. But I had to wake up 4 hours or 3 hours, and it gave me a headache all day. So I don't know what I was thinking to go over with Jamie for 28 days. Yeah, I think maybe I was crazy.
It's great. It's crazy, but it's got an interesting outcome because before everybody else joined the meeting, you were telling me the solution to this this rolling problem, and I think you've got some news to share that you're changing your allegiance from monohulls. Is that right?
Yeah, you know what? For 28 days, it was really hard, but I thought, okay. After one more day will be okay. Then in my cases, it was more difficult to anchor. It was more rolly and bumpy, and maybe that's why I want to move to catamaran. that experience for 28 days passage, and in my cases, yeah, I want to move to catamaran.
So of course we picked the most place in the world to decide to switch or to look for a new boat.
Yes, perfect timing. I'm going to see whether you get the thumbs up from the catamaran owners. So we've got 2 other catamaran owners on the line tonight. Valerie and Menno, catamaran or monohull? Would you go back to monohull? Would you? Or maybe get another hull, get a trimaran.
No, I think we're pretty happy with that. I don't think we would go back to the monohull.
Interesting.
It doesn't mean that a 3-week passage, we don't heal as much, but we still have our issues as well. You get some slack and noises, and so, but it's definitely different than a monohull. But definitely, I think at anchor, there's a big advantage on having a catamaran, where we tend to sleep very well, and all the monohulls are complaining how bad of a night it was, and we're like, "What are you talking about?" We slept all night. So I think it's an excellent platform for being at anchor.
I'll bring you some monohulls afterwards, but I'm going to go next to Richard and Alexandra and ask them about catamaran living, because my goodness, it's just like being in a kind of New York apartment, your place, isn't it?
Yeah. I think, the nickname for these boats is condomarans, but they're indisputably better at anchor, and nobody would think. I think that a monohull would be ever as stable as a cat, but at sea they're different. They are better overall, I think, but they are different. So here's the thing. So if we're going dead down the waves, which we like doing, we just go dead downwind, and it's very comfy, right? On a monohull, at 45 degrees of the waves, you're punching into them like this. A catamaran, if you just think about it for a moment, at 45 degrees of the wave, you hit each wave twice. Not once, twice. So you get stopped a lot more. And so it isn't just that, catamarans, if you like, struggle to go to windward. It's not as simple as that. It depends largely on the sea state. And we've got quite good sails, very good sails. We've got North 3DI sails, and we can outpoint most cruising monohulls, surprisingly, in calm water. We can go 30 degrees to the apparent in if it's calm. But once we start bashing, then it becomes a little bit different. The other thing is, I think that's very different is that we have 2 very small engines. They're 54 horsepower each, and you can put one engine on at 1200, 1500 RPM, and the sails, and you're doing 7 or 8 knots in most conditions. You're charging the batteries, and we carry well over 1,000 litres. We've got enough fuel to almost cross the Atlantic. You can't hear the engines, and that's one of the things they don't tell you, is you only ever use one engine at sea, and it's so quiet. And so the temptation always is to go that little bit faster, because you can't hear the engine, you've got the fuel, it charges the batteries even in the rain, and so there are many definite advantages to them, but it's not for everyone. Some people find that the motion in a big sea is not as comfortable as a monohull. Here's another thing. Here's another odd thing. If you think about a monohull at sea and you're heeling over, right? If you think about it, your mast never goes back beyond vertical. But all cruising cats, none of them actually lift a hull. We don't fly a hull, right? Which means that our boat, all these cruising cats will always do that. We heel a bit, maybe 10 degrees, but there's plenty of times where our mast will cant to windward because you're held to the sea, whereas a monohull would never have its mast canting to windward. And it's not a problem, doesn't matter, doesn't actually affect anything at all. And because our mast is more upright, we don't spill as much wind, so our sails have far more drive than monohull. It's just different.
Thanks, Richard. It's looking like you might have made the right choice, SunYoung, but I do have to balance the argument. So I want to bring in the monohullists, and I'm going to go first to the ruffians. Downgrading to a catamaran anytime soon, Ian and Fiona?
No. We're staying with monohulls. Always sell monohulls. We're going to stay with a single hull, and we know how it works. And we're a sailing boat, and the engine just gets us in and out of port, so we never turn the engine on.
What Richard said about some people just not liking the motion of the catamaran, I actually find even being on a catamaran in an anchorage very disconcerting. That sort of jittery feeling of one hull doing something different to the other hull makes me feel very uncomfortable. So I am.
Oh dear, Enki may not be the right choice. May not be the right choice.
Well, and you know, there's also a financial burden, isn't there? You know, we're sailing around on a 30-year-old 41-foot boat, which costs the same as a set of 3DL sails. So, and you know, we go if we ever do go into a marina. You know, our running costs are the running costs are just in a totally different world for us.
Pacific Wind, Ulf and Monica, monohulls, catamarans to issue. Have you brought the right boat?
Actually, when we were planning our trip, we wanted a catamaran, so we were all into it. Actually, we were going to sell the house and buy a catamaran, and we went to Croatia and rented one to try it out, see how it was to sail. And we still wanted one. Then we didn't want to sell the boat. Let's sell the house, so we couldn't afford it. So we bought a monohull instead.
Interesting.
But if I had the money and keep the house, I would buy a catamaran any day. Yeah.
So Michael and Annika, you get to be the. I think we've got two. You get the casting vote, I'm afraid. So. Condominium or tented accommodation?
We would definitely stick to the monohull. Because that's what we know about. We know the motion of the boat, as well as also on the ocean. When a gust comes, the boat will tilt down, and by that sort of minimize or get a smaller sail surface towards the wind. So it's more sort of flexing towards the wind out at sea. And that's a part of a safety matter, I think.
Okay, well, there's certainly a lot of catamarans out here, and it seems that the greatest danger that any of us face is actually hitting reefs, isn't it? Of all the accidents that have happened, I think we're now seeing maybe 3 or 4 boats that have lost rudders in one shape or form, including one that...
Now, Simon, can I bring up one more advantage on catamarans?
You've got two rudders.
That too, but before we even talk about the rudders, is when we hit something, we tend not to sink. We will just squat down. So the boat that sank, monohulls tend to go down very fast, as was told earlier. Usually 10, 15 minutes. If you get a major breach, your boat is underwater. Whereas the catamaran will, at least mine, will squat and it will never really sink. So the only time to really abandon a catamaran is when you have a fire. Otherwise, you would probably stay on the upper deck, and it would be safer than being in your life raft.
Interesting point, Menno. I'd not actually considered that. That's interesting. Yeah, and you have got duplication. You do have two engines, so if you lose one, you still got another. And we certainly know one catamaran that's lost. Well, two catamarans that have lost rudders in the last few weeks, and they've been able to continue. One didn't even know they'd lost their rudder, which is which is very weird. But they discovered it had gone when they went snorkeling, I believe, to look at the anchor. But so, do you need two rudders on a catamaran? Is a question for anybody? Richard, do you need two? Or do you...
Well, I have to say, I hope I never need to find out. But in theory, no, you'd be just fine. With one rudder, you would obviously lose a little bit of bite on the helm, and I suspect it would be fine at higher speeds when there's more water going over the rudder. Maneuvering the boat in port might be a little more difficult, but our rudders are in engine rooms, just like Valerie and Menno in Eyra. Our rudders and engine rooms are completely separate compartments, so. If a rudder ripped out, it's unlikely to cause the boat to founder.
And in terms of the boats that are cruising, my instinct is there's probably about 50-50 catamaran versus mono at the moment. Do you think is that about right in the Pacific at the moment? Jamie, you've been keeping. I think you stem both sides of the divide because you're upgrading or grading anyway. Do you think it's about 50-50 of us have got monohull versus catamaran, or are there more cats? It seems like there might be.
I actually think there's more cats. Certainly in the Caribbean, it was heavily weighted to cats. And I think monohulls have sort of recovered a little bit once you get to the Pacific. But yeah, I think we have 6 boats near us. And I think this is one of the few times where monohulls have been in the majority. There are, I guess it's 50-50. There are 3 monohulls and 3 cats. So.
Yeah, that's certainly our impression. It's at least 50-50, more in favour. Yeah, grand. I'm going to open up the conversation. Really, is anybody want to bring up anything? Well, why don't we talk about routing from here? So I think 1, 2, 3, 3 of us, 4 of these boats came via the Galapagos. 2 missed out the Galapagos. We've all spent the last, I guess, 2 or 3 months in the Marquesas and French Polynesia, Tuamotus, and now the Society Islands. Sally and I on Shimshal are going home for a holiday, and we'll be resuming next year. But we'll be very keen to see where you are all heading. Ian and Fiona, what are your plans when you get booted out by the lack of a French Polynesian visa?
So this is a question which we've been grappling with for many weeks as to which way to go. So the challenge from here is the Cook Islands really run north-south, and so you kind of make a decision: do you go to the south end of the Cooks or the north end of the Cooks? And from there, which way? Where do you? When do you want to end up in either Tonga? And do you then want to go to Fiji? So the question that we've been grappling with is: do we do Aitutaki, Niue, Tonga, which is kind of the southern route, or do we do Saguaro, Samoa, and then down to Tonga, which is the northern route? I think the other challenge back on the visas front is that if you only have 3 months in French Poly and you leave Panama, kind of when we all left Panama, January, February, then because you only get 3 months in Tonga, you're early for then leaving to New Zealand if you don't spend time in either the Cooks or in Samoa.
You need a bit of a fill up.
So you've got to have some filling space between French Poly and Tonga if you're not going to go on to Fiji, because and many boats don't want to go to Fiji because it's another 400 miles of easting. So just to get back to your initial question, where are we going next? It's one or the other. It's either Niue Tonga or Saguaro Samoa Tonga.
Interesting about the time limit in Tonga. I hadn't actually grasped that as being a constraint. So the maximum visa you can get in Tonga is 3 months. Is that correct?
Yeah. So everybody's granted 30 days when they enter, and then you can extend that by another 60 days. I'm only talking on the front of UK nationals. I've got no idea what US citizens or EU nationals
I suspect it's the same.
Yeah, but I think it's probably the same. But yeah, you're only given a maximum of 3 months, which is why a lot of people then go from Tonga down to Fiji. But the challenge there is that you've then lost 400 miles of easting, and the inability, or it's more difficult to stage at Minerva Reef when going down to New Zealand, which is why we don't want to go to Fiji.
So we plan to go to Fiji next year.
Is Minerva Reef? Do you check out from Minerva Reef, or what?
You check out from Tonga, but then you can get down to Minerva Reef, which takes 300 miles off the trip to New Zealand. So suddenly, leaving from Minerva Reef to New Zealand means that that trip is within one forecast. So you've got a much better idea as to what's happening with the weather, with potentially a pretty tricky sail.
So the time you spend in Minerva Reef then doesn't count as part of your Tonga visa.
No, because you would have already checked out Tonga. But the reason why you're going to Minerva Reef is as a staging post to go to New Zealand.
Yeah, to get this.
Yeah. Make the 7-day forecast a 5-day forecast.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So you guys are going somewhere. We're not quite sure where, but interestingly, driven a little bit by bureaucracy. Ulf and Monica, you guys. Well, originally you were heading on to Australia, but I think you altered your plans to go New Zealand. So presumably you're thinking of a similar route to Ruffian. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. We are thinking going the same way and go to Tonga first, and then go to Minerva Reef, and then to New Zealand. About the same time, I think, as Ruffian.
Yeah, and your understanding is, as European citizens, that European Union citizens, the time in Tonga is limited to 3 months. Is that correct?
I didn't hear that before, actually, so I don't know. But I think we're not going to be there so long, so that's not a problem for us. So
okay. Michael and Annika, you're going to Australia, I think, for family reasons.
Yes, that's correct. We hope to spend Christmas in Australia together with our daughter that's living in Brisbane. So the timing would be for us to head for Tonga, Fiji, New Caledonia, and then down to Brisbane. And as time flies, really, I mean, time is really, even though you have as much time as you want, still that's the limited factor. And we find that we will have about roughly 3 to 4 weeks in Tonga and 3 to 4 weeks in Fiji, and maybe only 1 week in New Caledonia, to manage to be in Australia by early November. So that's our plan. We've been in Tuamotu a little bit longer than planned, and as Ruffian was mentioning, more time in one place results in less time in the next place.
Understood. So Valerie and Menno have the answer to that. You're staying put, aren't you? So tell us about your plans for the winter, for the cyclone season, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. So our plan is to return back to the Marquesas for cyclone season and then next year come back down to the Tuamotus and then head towards New Zealand. But so that gives us a lot of extra time. So we've actually stopped westing at this point, and we're sitting out here waiting for opportunities to hop eastward now, and just trying to get a better angle so then we can make it back to the Marquesas on a decent angle, hopefully.
Yeah. So we're looking forward to catching up with you this time next year, or perhaps a little earlier in the Society Islands, and drifting west, following in the wake of these guys. Looking forward to that. Richard and Alexandra, you guys, well, you've been underway in the Pacific for longer than the rest of us, but I'm guessing you're going to start moving fairly soon westwards?
Yeah, I actually had to, I filled in the online form to leave French Polynesia the other day, and I plumped for the 17th of July, which in theory is when we're going. So we go from here to Bora Bora, clear out in Bora Bora, and then if you ask the gendarmes nicely in Bora Bora, they'll let you go to Maputi, even though you've cleared out. From there, we're going to go to, exactly as Fiona and Ian were saying on Ruffian, do we go the south route or the north route? We're going to go the south route. We're going to go to Atataki. 4 of the oysters in the World Rally went to Atataki. Then we might go to Palmerston, which is quite a small place. Then Niue. And then Tonga. And our original plan had been exactly the same as Ruffian, which was to go to Tonga and then Minerva Reef. So it's like a couple of days from Tonga to Minerva, and then maybe 5-6 days from Minerva to New Zealand. But nagging at us is that so many people say that Fiji is somewhere you could spend years and years. And apparently Fiji is 4 times the size of French Polynesia, and French Polynesia is the size of Europe. There's 1 million people there, but it's apparently absolutely stunning in Fiji. So we're going to spend more time in Fiji, less time in Tonga. And then we discovered this wonderful thing called the New Zealand Rally. And the trick to going to New Zealand apparently is you don't want to go too early in October because it's freezing cold. You don't want to leave it until November because it's cyclone season. So the New Zealand rally boats all sit there from the 15th of October onwards in one of 4 places. You've got Tonga, Fiji, Vanuatu, or New Caledonia. And they wait until the weather router says go. And about 100 boats in the rally in those 4 places all leave, more from Fiji and New Caledonia, I think. And you all go south. The boats going from Tonga, some stop in Minerva, but often you can't stop in Minerva because it's too rough. And then you go to New Zealand, and they sort out our clearances into New Zealand and other things. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to come up the following, spring. I say spring, it's autumn there. May 2025. Go back, maybe back to Fiji, Vanuatu, New Caledonia, then across to Australia, then the Indonesian rally to Singapore, the Malaysian rally, then up to Thailand, and that'll be it for the next year, and then across the Indian and back to the Caribbean.
Very good, very good. When you mentioned the New Zealand rally, I think many of us were tuned into that webinar a couple of weeks ago with Vicky Moore, who of course is our OCC regional rear commodore for Australia and New Zealand at the moment, who runs that rally and assists a lot of boats going south. SunYoung and Jamie, you've got an interesting problem, haven't you? Because you've got 2 boats to 2 boats to coordinate across the Pacific.
Luckily, one is probably pre-positioned. So I think for us, we're going to end up in New Zealand, and our expiry date in the South Pacific is November 1st, as driven by the insurance adjusters. So I think at the moment we're tentatively thinking of leaving from Tonga, second half of October, something like that. And we were on that webinar with Vicky, and she's really helpful with information about New Zealand and all the procedures and things like that. So we're not really rally joiners. We've never joined one, but we may in this case.
Yeah, we'll join this time.
Yeah, this will be our first rally of any kind. So,
which is certainly a great resource to
yeah,
inside intelligence, and obviously very experienced at shifting boats north and south. I just before we close, I just want to talk about weather routing. And we touched on weather a bit earlier on and how difficult it is to predict. We had a really good. I guess we've dabbled with weather routers twice on this trip. Once when we were trying to finesse a date to leave the Marquesas, and we used a guy called Bob McDavitt, who really gave such generalist advice. It was all. I'm conscious this is this might go to the public domain. It wasn't terribly useful, but when we were trying to find a window to get ahead of the squash zone, we'd come to our own conclusion with Predict Wind, and it was brilliant to pick up the phone to John Martin in Auckland, Apua, and just talk it through with him. And I have to say, his routing for us was really, really helpful. So we'll be using John Martin next year for sure. Has anybody else had any experience with John? I think Pacific Wind have. You guys use John, don't you?
Yeah, we have used John when we left from Galapagos to Marquesas. Yeah, I think he was a great guy. I think he was helpful. Yeah.
And also now, I mean, we discuss every passage.
Yeah, we have used him for the whole season, so we're going to use him all the way to New Zealand.
Yeah, he certainly gave us some steers as to we got caught out in that storm in the Tuamotus a couple of weeks before when we weren't using a weather router at that stage, and all of them missed it. But he was explaining why that was so intense and so unusual to get those 40, 45 knot winds just out of nowhere that were sustained, largely because of the temperature the very warm water and the temperature differentials between open ocean and the Motus. So we're definitely going to use him. I never had great experience with routers before, but we were very impressed this time. So let's have a quick run around. Who is using or will be using a professional router for the next leg? I guess getting this far, it's just you just put the sails up in Panama and you take them down when you get to Hivaroa, and the wind shifts between a couple of 10 degrees, and the winds are all under 30 knots. And go ahead.
We actually used a weather router all the way across the Pacific, and I'm very pleased that we did. We used Chris Parker, and we've used Chris Parker for many years for all of our ocean passages. And I'm pleased that we did even for the Pacific, because we had issues with our rigging coming across, and we told Chris Parker about our issues and that we needed a nice, safe, low wind, low wave rig. Trouble the whole way. So we used Chris Parker then, and we're still using him now, and we'll be using him to get to New Zealand as well.
So Chris will route you right the way to New Zealand, even though he's in Florida or whatever. I guess the world's a small place.
Yeah. So he runs it up every afternoon. He runs an open webcast, which you just start into and have a one-to-one chat with Chris.
Thanks to Starlink.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, very good. So I think Valerie and Menno, you have the same experience with Chris. Is that right?
Yes, we've used Chris Parker in the Caribbean, and when we left the east coast of the U.S. So we basically use him when we have big passages. That's usually the only time. And so when we were in Panama, I kind of said, "Hey, goodbye. We're not going to be in the Caribbean anymore." And he said, "Well, I still route in the Pacific as well." So we did use him to give us advice to get to the Galapagos, and from the Galapagos to the Marquesas. And both times it was very helpful for us.
Great, very good.
So we haven't quite decided yet. Do we continue to use Chris, or do we start using people that live in the Caribbean? And so we're open right now. I think we have still a few credits with him, so we may use him to get back up to the Marquesas and use up those credits. But after that, I think it's open, but he's still a consideration.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Michael and Annika, are you guys using a router, or are you just putting a finger in the air and because you've got a big strong boat, you just go whatever?
No, we're not using a router. No, But it's certainly seen when we've seen other boats having it, it's been useful and helpful. So we consider it, but no, we have never used it out there before. No.
Okay.
No,
Richard?
but we might will participate in the Down Under rally. So we're looking into that now, and then you will get some information on weather routing through the rally.
And I think
that's one. That's.
I think they used they used Bob McDavitt and John Hembrow for that. I think is that right, Annika?
I don't know who they use.
Sorry, John Martin. Not John
Hembrow.
Yeah. Richard and Alexandra, what do you guys do? Do you just use? You use Predict Wind, don't you?
I have to admit, I haven't used a weather router. Just remembering since October 1992 was the last time I actually, dialed into Portishead and had a weather router. Ever since then, never. But I've been on lots of, Atlantic arcs, things like that, where we've had weather forecasting as part of the rally. In the last arc, which I did across the Atlantic, Chris Tibbs, who's the weather forecaster, hopefully this doesn't go public, but a lot of us were convinced that he'd actually been reading the previous year's forecast, as it was hopelessly and utterly wrong. I mean, most of us had lost sails before we'd even left the compression area of the Canaries because he was hopelessly wrong. And, it was just dreadful. And certainly, if you paid for that on a one-to-one basis, you would not have been happy. I think for me, with the advent of Starlink, and particularly once we could get the ECMWF model, which you couldn't get until a few years ago because it was a paid-for model, and there's so many different ways of manipulating that, I think that we would just do the routing ourselves. But having said that, one of the big attractions of the New Zealand rally is somebody else is going to fire the gun and say, at some point, one day after the 15th October, it might be the 15th October, it might be the 20th or the 25th, bang, go, and it might be, go from Caledonia, but don't go to Tonga. And these are people that do this every year. They sail those waters. So in that case, I would actually pay for that if it didn't come for free with the rally.
I think being the more conservative member of our team, I like the idea of weather routing and a rally, so that you've got the best information you can get on the weather from somebody who's paid to do it, but also you're going with a number of different boats at the same time, so that if the weather forecast is hopelessly incorrect, that you can also support each other. But I think with the advent of Starlink, just being able to get weather at your fingertips is a game changer, for sure.
Yeah, it is. It is amazing. We lost confidence in weather routers in the Davis Strait because it turned out they could route the weather, but they had no idea how to interpret an ice chart. That's a completely different issue in the Pacific. Jamie and SunYoung, routers, not routers. So what are you using for your weather forecasting?
So far, we've never used a router, even going from the East Coast of the United States down to the Caribbean. Not yet. So we've done it ourselves using various tools. Originally, before Starlink, we had Iridium, which meant you had a very small grid and very tiny, and downloading a lot of those. One of the nice things about OpenCPN is you can put a NOAA weather chart and a grid on the same page, and that was really a light bulb moment for me to actually see the weather barbs and the features on the weather map drawn by an actual meteorologist. We're a lot less familiar with the Pacific, especially down to New Zealand. It's a tricky passage. I think we'd either be paying for a router or more likely going with the rally.
Yeah, interesting. Great. Guys, I've kept you long enough. I think it's been great having a chat.
Can I add one more thing, Simon, if I may, about rallies. We joined in with a rally that's already happened now in Moorea, called the Moorea Rendezvous Rally, which was just a long weekend of fun and festivities. But the great thing about that, for people like us who are heading into countries that we've not been to before, is that they invite a lot of marinas, yards, tourist officials and people like that to come and give us information about where we're going and where we can go and what we can do. And there's another one happening in Vanuatu or Tonga in September, where again there'll be, you know, similar people talking and similar people visiting to come and try and sell you their marina or their dockyard or whatever. But it's an interesting way of getting information. So sure. I think that's another one we should all look for and probably meet up, have a drink together.
And particularly important when you're going up around Indonesia and Borneo, those sort of areas. I think most people would travel in rallies. I think, Richard, you said you were going to look into the Indonesian rally. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. And one of the well, it's not only that. What is the route of the Indonesian rally? And the answer is it depends what the government decides that year, because they take you to different villages and different places. I think it's something like 20 different places in 2 months or something. And, you know, and you're going to places and they say, well, you won't get fuel for 2 weeks. So make sure you've got fuel and this sort of thing. But it changes each time. And it finishes just near Singapore. So, yeah, I think that, and there's about quite a few boats do. I think it's about 40 odd boats that do it, a lot of European boats. So that's bigger than the World Arc or the Oyster World Rally. And that kind of worries me slightly because I don't really fancy traveling in a group of 40, but I guess it'll all work itself out one way or the other.
We all got squeezed by the big rallies when we were in Galapagos or in French Polynesia, and yeah, so but not say too much about that in a public forum or a potentially public forum. But yeah, look, guys, I really enjoyed the chat. Is it worth us hooking up again in another 3 or 4 weeks' time? It's up to you guys. So if you think it's a waste of time, we'll can it at this. If you'd like to hook up again in 3 or 4 weeks' time, I'd be delighted to do that. We'll be back on Greenwich Mean Toll, British summertime by then. But so it'll be about, I don't know, 2 o'clock in the morning or something. But I don't know what time it'll be. But do you think it's worthwhile, or do you think it's a waste of time? Just give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and I'll count the thumbs. Nobody's putting any thumbs. So thumbs up from Pacific Wind, from Enki, from Matilda. 100% thumbs up. And it's a thumbs up from Sally, who said nothing. Sally, come and say something.
No, this is your show, so I wasn't going to interrupt.
Not my show. It's not my show at all. The Northwest Passage is my show. So if you haven't watched those are great fun, because those are guys who've got a really awesome thing ahead of them. So yeah, they're just starting their summer of adventure.
And the Ciguatera account.
The Ciguatera talk one was really interesting.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It reminded me of being a doctor once. Yeah, a long time ago. Yeah. Yes, I knew there was a reason why I had a lifelong aversion to fish, and now I know why. But Jamie, you've been spearfishing. That's suicide. It's Russian roulette.
You know, we would spear a fish and we would send a picture to the mayor of Amanu and be like, "Can we eat this?" And he'd be like, "Yes." So, look, we don't eat a lot of speared fish, so we probably, I don't know, haven't built up our lifetime thing yet. But since then, we switched to octopus and whelks.
Yeah.
So we've been going on the outside of the reef and at low tide and picking up whelks.
Well, the last time I saw,
we're running out of protein.
The last time I saw the crew of Matilda and Pacific Wind, we all had a lobster supper, and I then had to go back to the internet and check: does lobster contain Ciguatera? The answer is no.
Right. And I wouldn't know why, because whelks and things like that, they sit around and they eat algae all day. So
Oh, different disease, yeah, red tide that you get in Patagonia and stuff that kills people as well. But
oh, there you go.
That's a different story. A different story. Look, thanks ever so much for spending the time today. I know you guys in Apitaki have got nothing else to do there because you've been at anchor for a week or two now, and I know that Alex and Richard have got a really vibrant nightlife in Raiatea. But thank you for hooking up. Thank you for joining in. We'll organise something in let's say 3 weeks. I have no idea when that is or where we'll be, but we'll let you know the date, and we'll maybe try and get some other boats in. And I think it's useful just to share the information about visas, about routers, about these things. It would have made our life a lot easier if we'd have tuned into something like this a year ago, because I didn't even know where Aputapi was at that stage. So, guys, thank you very much for joining in, and we're signing out from Shimshell. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Bye. Bye.